Hello, everyone, and welcome to Democrats Abroad's first ever Substack Live. We are thrilled to be here, and I am just waiting for my guest, Martha, to make her appearance. So if you could bear with me for a moment until then, that would be absolutely super. Don't mind me for a moment. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Just one moment, please, as I said. I'm just trying to find Martha and the guests, so please just, like I said, hold on for 1 second, please. Hi! Great to see you all out there in the stackosphere. This is Democrats Abroad's first ever Substack Live, and we only recently joined the platform, and so we're getting our grounding and are here on the platform. Seems like a really fun and nice community of people, though, so we're really happy to be here. Just give me 1 second, please, while I see if Martha's doing with logging in. I don't want to preempt her, but there's been a lot of elections-related news and lately, and so it seemed like a perfect opportunity with so much going on and being discussed for us to come on and have our first ever Substack Live. So let's see. I see a bunch of friends in the chat. All right, super. I see a bunch of friends in the chat. Great to see you. Love to see it. Those of you who know Martha, can you go check on her account, please, and see how it's doing? I would like to delete the first 2 minutes of this live. Sorry about that. Cheyenne, is that something you know if we could do? We're going to stop it and then restart it. Oh, that would be super. Thank you very much. Hi, Patty, Peggy, Kashia, Deborah. Hi, everyone. Cheyenne, of course. Let me see if Martha is. She's logged in. Okay, we are waiting for you. 1 second. Hi. All right, let's see. Okay, perfect. Any guests can be joined. I am just waiting for Martha, everyone. Getting the kinks out early in our system here. Mhm. Okay, that's fine. Just starting it. 5 minutes would be great. Just cutting off the beginning. All right. So, um, this is like what Mike Tyson said about boxing. Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the nose. This is our first live on this platform, and we are inching forward here. I'm streaming live from Slovakia. Great question, Cheyenne. I'm streaming live from Slovakia, and it was actually a gorgeous and sunny day out here. But very happy to be spending it with you all. Where's everyone else calling in from? Very nice. Ooh, all over. I'm reading it out. What else is new? There we are. Hello, hello, hello. All right. Martha is here. I invited her to the I mean, granted, middle of the workday, but late lunch. All right, so we're waiting for. And there we are. Hello, hello, hello.
Hey there. How you doing?
All right, super. Well, great. Now that you're here, we were all just getting to know each other on chat. Bunch of
It
fun
was
and
fun.
friendly names. Yes, indeed, indeed. All right, everyone. So let's officially begin. We don't want this to be too long, but hi everyone, great to see you out there. Democrats Abroad recently became active on Substack, and we're beginning to feel our way around the platform, really enjoying our experience here so far. So wanted to say hi to all of the people out there on Substack, especially those Americans abroad, or thinking about being abroad, or potentially coming abroad for whatever reason, and all those people who are interested in elections and elections rights and elections related issues, because that's what we're here to talk about. So there has been a lot but without further ado, I am really excited to welcome our international chair, Martha McDevitt Pugh, to join me here.
Great. Thanks to be here. Great to be here. And thanks so much, Aaron.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my name is Aaron Fishbone. I am Global Comms Director of Democrats Abroad, and Americans abroad, wherever you are out in the world, understand that you can vote. Please go to votefromabroad.org to register and request your ballot, and then take the steps necessary in order to get that ballot back. There's all kinds of elections taking place, special elections, elections for state legislature and other down ballot races, people who are leaving Congress and whatnot. And these elections are happening all the time. If you register at votefromabroad.org, they will tell you where to go. They will email you information about all the elections that you are eligible for. You don't need to necessarily track them all. You'll receive this information in your email inbox if you indicate to receive it that way, which is one of the great benefits of registering as an abroad voter, which you can do at votefromabroad.org. So please do so right now. Like I said at the beginning, there's a lot of elections related news going on coming out of Washington, D.C. And we want to take a minute it seems like a perfect opportunity for us to have our inaugural Substack live as Democrats abroad. So we'll be talking about the SAVE Act, the Save America Act, so-called. We'll be talking about the issues with RNC versus Watson that were in the Supreme Court yesterday. And we're also really excited to talk about some of the upcoming activities and mobilizations going on this Saturday for the Global Day of Defiance, No Tyrants, No Kings, which we'll talk about at the end. And we'll wrap it up all in about no more than a half hour, because we've all got stuff to do. But we really wanted to just be here to say hi to everyone. And so, Martha, before we dive into some of the elections related substance, I think there's a lot of misconceptions or just lack of awareness of who Americans abroad are, right? Lots of people know someone abroad, but when we say Americans abroad, we know who we think we are, but I think a lot of other people don't, and probably don't think about it, right? Other than maybe their cousin or their roommate or their, ex, whatever. So would you take a moment and just talk a little bit about is this organization, this community, this global community of Americans abroad, and what brought us out here?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, Aaron. I mean, there are millions of Americans that live abroad. We're not counted in the census. There's not an exact number, but the government estimates that that's up to 9 million people, 6 million of whom are potential voters. And there's so many reasons why Americans move abroad. And I actually moved abroad on March 25th, 2000. So it's my anniversary day of moving abroad tomorrow.
Oh, wow. It's my wife's birthday. Congratulations.
Oh, really?
Lots to celebrate tomorrow then. Yeah.
It's my mother's birthday. Yeah.
Oh,
So I thought I was coming for 2 years, right? I was going to come over here. I fell in love. I wanted to be with my new partner and future wife. And it seemed like that was the way to do that, was to come abroad, and then we'd figure our way back into the United States. And we discovered there was no legal avenue for us to do that as a married couple, as two women at that time. So I stayed a little bit longer, and we fought for the right to immigrate as same-sex couples, and we stayed. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people. They come to study abroad, or maybe for a job opportunity or travel, but a lot of it is for family reasons. People who have, decided to move abroad to be with a partner or others, to take care of family members. There's so many different reasons that people move abroad, and so it's a big community. It's a pretty wonderful community, because I think Americans are very patriotic. We love our country. We're very attached, and have a lot of friends and family back in the places that we used to live. And that's why it's so special that the way we vote is we vote back in the place where we last lived, a place where we have connections, where we, have a stake in what happens. Our friends and family are there. We've, grown up there, or we've worked and lived there. So it's a community of people that are abroad for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I came abroad for personal reasons as well. Also intended only to come for 2 years. My wife was still in school. My then girlfriend and wife, who was still in school. We got married, and then one thing led to another. Led to child number one, then child number two, job situation, then COVID. Right, COVID ended up keeping us in place for 2.5 years, and here we are. still to this
Yeah.
day. Yeah,
Indeed. Well, a lot of folks, like do plan to return at some point. Who knows, right?
absolutely,
There could be all kinds of reasons and motivations to want to go back at some point.
absolutely.
But I also love being in the United States and visiting friends and family and going back to the places where I used to live and almost feeling a little bit like a tourist.
Yeah.
But yeah, who knows?
Exposing my kids to baseball and great food
Mm,
that are our specialties. Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, I think that voting then is one of the other than all those visits, and trips to friends and family and shared cultural touchstones. Voting and voting at home is one of the main ways that we stay connected to our heritage country, right? And care deeply about the direction it takes, how it's impacting people back home, its influence around the world, and whatnot. So, given all of that, okay, I think we're all 2-year people still with open question marks. Very good, everyone. Um, Given all that, there's been a lot of discussion of elections, right? And right now, kind of the Senate is debating this thing called the Save America Act. Trump is threatening completely facetiously to, nationalize elections and try to basically have the government take over what's our state constitutional responsibility to run elections. Meanwhile, there's a case in the Supreme Court. So let's start with the Save America Act. Can you speak to what it is briefly, why it is so controversial, and what it would mean for Americans abroad in particular?
yeah, for sure. Well, the Save America Act is one of a number of bills that really attempt to apply new standards and new hoops to jump through, and requirements for US citizens who want to vote. And it's legislation, right? It's proposed legislation. A version of this bill passed the House of Representatives a while back. It's in the Senate now with a new name, Save America Act. It's got a lot of stuff thrown into it, not all of which has anything at all to do with voting. But it claims that there are problems in our voting system, none of which are evidenced in any kind of substantial way. And it would require a lot of extra steps for any US citizen who wants to vote to prove who they are, to prove their citizenship, all these kinds of things that the government does know about us, right? We are, part of the web of information that our government has. Our citizenship and other things like that are well documented, and yet it requires, demonstrating when we vote by mail. Of course, we live abroad, so we're going to vote by mail because we can't show up at our polling place. But it requires, documentation, which then has to, be acquired. Not everybody has a passport. Half of Americans have a passport. Maybe a few more of us are abroad have passports, but not everyone has a passport that is not expired, or a birth certificate, and all these kinds of things. Again, extra steps in the process to prove something that the government already knows about us. And what does that do? First of all, it says Save America, that there's a problem with voting, right? It asserts something, whereas, the evidence is that we have free and fair elections in the United States. It does that. It also, proposes that there has to be something done about something. And that is, really confusing for a lot of people. But the thing I notice most with Americans abroad is they're really concerned that they're still going to have a right to vote this November. It's why we're encouraging everybody to vote in the primaries back in the state where you vote, to make sure that the process is working for you, to say, hey, hi, I'm here, to speak up, to express yourself. People are really concerned about what all this legislation might do. But in the meantime, we have the right to vote. This is a moment that Americans abroad can and should be exercising that right. But legislation like this, the Save America Act, it confuses people. And I will tell you that when voters become confused or even intimidated, there's some kind of a suggestion that there's something not valid about their right to vote, it distances themselves from the process, right? Voting is something that is a collective activity. When you vote back in wherever you're from, you're showing up at a physical polling place, you're maybe seeing your neighbors, you're deciding which time to go, you're bringing your kids, bringing them into the process. But when we vote by mail, we're not as connected in person, which is so important. And it's why Democrats Abroad is here, to connect people to the voting process, to vote as a community, to make sure that everybody knows how to do that and can get through all the different steps of the process. But it's actually, I think, diabolical to actually suggest that there's something wrong with our voting system and something needs to change. And that that questioning of our voting system is one of the things that this legislation is intended to do, which is to say it doesn't have to even pass to have an impact and have people be afraid to vote. And that's,
Right.
again, why we're here as Democrats abroad, all around the world, in person, in countries and cities on every continent, is to connect people with community and let people know exactly what the story is.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you made a lot of really good points there. I mean, the first, of course, is that this is almost a messaging bill, right? The idea is to already lay the groundwork for a future claim of, calling into question the results of the election, especially if Republicans are trounced, as we're increasingly seeing likely that will happen. And then they can say, look, there was fraud. But that fraud, of course, they keep saying, look, there's fraud without any proof. We included data from recently from the Brookings Institution, which says that there's almost no measurable amount of voter fraud in the United States. The Brennan Center for Justice at New York University said you are more likely to be hit by lightning than there will be voter fraud in the district in which you vote. And so, I mean, it's obviously they're creating the idea of a problem, which does not really exist, and tying it to other tropes of illegal immigration and things like that, just to try to scare people. So, I mean, first it's to say there is no problem, right? There's no measurable problem with voting, and also states control elections. That's Article 1, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution, right? It is not a federal competence. It is the states who do it, and states have their own laws and their own procedures, but all of them conduct their elections legally and validly. And it is only the case that eligible, legal U.S. citizens are able to vote in U.S. elections, and that's something that is controlled, and our eligibility is verified by our Secretary of State, by a local elections office or county elections office who is closest to us, right, at the voting level, who's closest to the individual voters in their state. So it's kind of ironic to then hear, King Trump, I guess, jumping ahead to no kings, no tyrants, talking about nationalizing elections when historically Republicans have stood for states' rights, against an overreaching Fed. And now you have the most clear, maybe the clearest example of an overreaching Fed in a very, very, very long time. So states run elections, and we send our ballots from abroad. I mean, there are hundreds of millions of people who'll be impacted by this because of the requirements for documentary proof of citizenship, like you said, passport, birth certificate. But specifically in the case of Americans abroad, when we vote, how do we then transmit our ballots back?
Well, we vote by mail, right? We get our ballots either sent to us by postal mail, depending on how we request them. I mean, we can say how we want to get our ballot. We can say, send it to me by email. I will download it and print it. Or we can say, send it to me by postal mail, right? And we do that at votefromabroad.org. But there's a standard form. It's a one-pager. It's a one-page form that we fill in with our basic information and with a declaration that we are a U.S. citizen. We sign, we date that, we send that into our local election official, wherever we last lived and where we're voting. And they then send us a ballot. And the thing about Americans abroad is that we are covered under a federal law that guarantees our right to vote. I don't know if everyone here remembers the 2000 election, Bush v. Gore, which was decided when the Supreme Court said stop counting the ballots. Those were the ballots of American civilians and military members abroad, and they weren't counted. And you can imagine what a moment like that means for an American abroad who now doesn't know if their ballot is ever going to be counted, right? And so fortunately, the government came with new legislation and required that every ballot from abroad be counted. And those ballots, we're transmitting them by putting them in the mail, or in some cases, sending them by a email to fax program or uploading it. But as you said, Aaron, it's a state's issue in terms of what methods are in place to return ballots back to the places that we live. That's how that works. And, we have a federally guaranteed right, but we do vote according to the local state rules. So for every American abroad, the state rules apply in terms of, what exactly form of identification they want, your social security number, and these kinds of things are quite specific, as well as the deadlines.
Yeah. I think that's one of the most fun and interesting and also time-consuming and difficult work of being an active member of Democrats abroad, is because, Americans abroad are a highly mobile group, right? There's new study abroad students. There's new study abroad students. There's digital nomads. There's people who are moving from one country to another country, newly deployed people and military families and whatnot. And people are moving, right? And so, but everyone votes back home in their own state according to the own rules and procedures and deadlines of that state. And so, we at FDA need to be aware of all of those rules. And then as they change, if a state legislature changes some rule or procedure, we need to be aware of that as well, so that when people come to us, if they don't know that they can vote, or even how to do so from wherever country they're in to whichever state they need to send their ballot back to, by what time, that's an exact area where Democrats Abroad and Vote from Abroad is really, uniquely positioned to be able to help them, and probably one of the most value added things that we do from an elections perspective. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I just want to give a big shout out to all those local election officials. They're just really, really incredible. There's
Volunteers, almost all. Yeah.
volunteers and staff and all of that who make it possible in all those different local districts, for folks who live there as well as who live abroad, to be able to vote in person or mail in. Really just an incredible body of people. And it's really offensive that this government should be calling into question, the intentions and the actions of those local voting officials who work so hard to do such an amazing job.
And
Um,
criminalizing them if they were to
yeah,
make an innocent mistake, which is a part of the Safe America Act, is again one of the more diabolical parts
yeah,
of it, right?
yeah,
Just people volunteering their time. I mean, I did it 3 times when I was in college. I was a poll worker 3 times,
yeah,
with a bunch of grandparents and retired people and other students. And I mean, we were all
yeah,
just trying to help out, help
yeah.
democracy function.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. I mean, it takes something for democracy to function. It takes
Yeah.
a lot of people. So not only those election officials, but I think especially in this moment, it takes all of us. Like a lot of us, were, raised learning about how elections work in school, and yay, American democracy is the best in the world and all these kinds of things. And you kind of just go with the flow, and you live in the assumption that that's always going to work. And I think we're finding in this moment right now within our own government, and with this regime, there's a lot of attacks on our country and on our democracy and voting systems. And it means that we can't just kind of go with the flow anymore. I mean, of course, it's great to do just what you've always done and vote and invite other people into that system. But it's very important that we have our voices be heard, and that the American people stand up to the kind of America that we want to live in, and demand all of our rights.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So, I think it's worth saying, just to conclude this discussion of the Save America Act, as awful as it is, and please call your senators again. Thank you, Cheyenne, for adding a link into the chat to tell them to keep firm, vote no on the Save Act. It will disenfranchise hundreds of millions of people. Americans abroad, we have our own unique situation with showing up in person to register and vote, but other people have problems with showing up in person if they live in a rural area, or not having a passport, or not being able to get a birth certificate, or a birth certificate matches the last name that they maybe have now as a married once or twice married person. And all of those are huge burdens. The state of Kansas tried to do something very similar in 2011 and 13, and ultimately was shot down by a court because it was ultimately disenfranchised tens of thousands of people within the state. And so Kansas is let's say the cautionary tale of what could happen. Yeah. So vote now. But again, states run elections, and until anything happens in Congress, whatever Trump says, states run elections. So vote now. Make sure you get your ballots back for all the elections you can, primaries, generals, and let's try to vote accountability back into office, please. And whatever point in the year 2026 you are eligible to vote. So speaking of deadlines. Right. There is this case at the Supreme Court, RNC versus Watson, that's been bubbling for a long time. And it was finally, oral arguments were heard this week. And, it's not uniquely Americans abroad issue, but it is very much an elections issue. And so can you speak to it a little bit? What's going on, and what's the unique angle that we have on it?
Sure. Well, Aaron, as you mentioned earlier, states' rights, right? The states are the ones that determine when ballots are due. And in the case of mail-in ballots, they are going to go through a postal system. There's in a number of states, there are rules that allow the ballot to be postmarked by election day, but then received, given that the postal service is not always working optimally, and that you can't predict how many days it's going to take for your ballot to get in, and just to create a level playing field, making sure that people can vote on election day, but then still have their vote counted. States have rules that allow, in some cases, for the ballot to come in a bit later. Other states have rules that it has to be received on. That's our democracy. That's our Constitution, states' rights. And so, under the cover of talking about all these nefarious things that are supposedly going on with elections, there are now challenges to the deadlines for ballots that are sent in by mail. And that has consequences on a lot of people. There are a lot of people, not just Americans abroad, who are using mail-in ballots, but in particular Americans abroad. We live in countries that do not always have reliable postal services. We have ballots that have to go through whatever kind of, postal service, or in some cases, people are able to drop off their ballot at a local embassy or consulate, which has to be done way in advance to make sure that that mail can then get transmitted to the United States. And then it has to go through the US Postal Service, right? So
So it
all of that,
arrives somewhere. It arrives from wherever consular
somewhere.
pouch to some
Yep.
central location, and then there it enters the U.S.
Yeah,
postal system.
yeah. So that's also a bit of a fraught system, right? Because you kind of think if you drop something off at a government office, like a consulate or an embassy, they're going to take care of stuff for you, right? But of course, they have to put those letters and things that are in the diplomatic pouch into airplanes, and again, they get dropped into some kind of a postal processing center, and then they have to go through there as well. So that can lead to certain delays, with ballots. And Americans abroad are not always like completely clear on what those deadlines are. And of course, we want everyone to vote as soon as they get their ballot, to like fill it in, put it in the mail the next day, return it, so that we can, get those ballots in time. But again, there are a number of challenges, and not everyone does return their ballot immediately. And it's very important that everyone be able to express themselves in our democracy. So one way to reduce the number of people voting, and maybe particularly, undermine the votes of those of us who live abroad, or to say, states can't decide that anymore. States cannot decide anymore to honor ballots that were properly postmarked by election day or before election day, and that were just received a little bit after that. So that's what that case is about. And, my view of that is that's another form of voter suppression. We have a system that works. We have a system that's within the law. We have a system that's within the Constitution. And again, create doubt, make it sound like there's something really weird going on. And, people's minds will go there. They'll start to think, well, maybe there is something wrong. And that's why it's so important that we stay focused on exerting our constitutional right to vote, and doing that according to all the rules that there are, because we, as you said earlier, and votefromabroad.org, we have a page for each state that explains exactly what the deadlines and rules and so forth are there. It's so important that in this moment of complete chaos creation and sowing doubt about elections and about voters and about certain groups of voters, it's so important to just follow the system, to just do the thing that we can do. If you don't exert your rights, if you don't exercise them, they can be taken away. So that's why it's so important right now that, as we're in the middle of primaries in many different states, it's very important that Americans abroad exercise that right to vote.
Yeah, absolutely. Martha, do you know if the, let's say, mail ballot return system is different for military than civilian abroad voters?
Well, so military voters would have more access to like APO boxes and things like that. So potentially to methods to transport their ballots back, which, like a civilian voter living wherever, right? I live in the Netherlands, and I don't live with a consulate around the corner, right? Like that. So I am going to be reliant on the regular Dutch postal service to be able to put my ballot back, if I'm going to send it by postal mail. But I'm a California voter, so I can actually use an email to fax program, and that's what I've done for a number of years now, and put my ballot through the system there, and it gets received and confirmed and acknowledged and counted exactly according to the law in California, right? It's tracked. I can see where my ballot is. And I can see when it's been received and when it's been counted, and I get that confirmation. So, in my case, I don't have to rely on that postal service, but many states, especially many critical election states, right, where elections are very close, like Georgia or Wisconsin or Pennsylvania and many others, do require a postal ballot. And if you're in somewhere that does not have a well-functioning postal service, you really have to be very proactive in terms of getting your ballot back in time, turning it around right away, or sending it by courier. There's a lot that we can do as Democrats abroad there to help people get those ballots back right away.
Yeah, no, that's all great. That is really powerful, and I think inspiring, as someone in the chat said. I think there's I mean, there's a few things, right? First of all, by the way, also military and civilian voters both have to ultimately send their ballots back, and that those ballots enter the U.S. postal system at one time, right? So we're not standing in front of our polling station in our home state and then able to show up in person and vote on election day. Which again, as a poll worker, it was a lot of fun being there in election day on election day and standing in line with other people and chatting and building that civic fibers. But it was also not a vacation day. It was also not time off of work. I mean, we have these structural barriers. And I mean, I think the point is to help and expand the right to vote so that more and more eligible citizens can vote. We have the problem of not enough people in America voting, not the opposite problem of mass voter fraud by people who are not Americans. Like literally, that's not a problem. They've just making it up so that they can pass voter restrictions on. But this is the Supreme Court. This is not, the would-be tyrant. Just passing edicts that have no bearing behind them. And so, the Supreme Court is seriously considering that even despite that mail-in voting has been taking place since the Civil War, that there are many classes of people who are in the state, living in a, big state and are not able to physically get themselves to a polling station for whatever reason, that they should limit the right to vote, limit the ability to get your ballots back simply by saying it is not possible. You're not okay to postmark your ballot by election day. Rather, it must now be received by election day. Yeah. And I think, the Supreme, I was reading some coverage of this case, and the Secretary of State of Arizona was there saying, okay, so we have elections procedures in place today. I mean, all states have a system for mail-in voting, right? It's standard practice, and it just was really expanded during COVID because that was a great way to keep people distance and not standing online infecting each other. So then the franchise grew to sort of what it is today, so that more and more people could vote more easily, and again, not have to get daycare or not have to get a special service to bring them to the polling station. And now they're trying to reduce the scope of that yet again. And I mean, I vote in Washington State, right? So I also vote in all electronic return state, and there are no recorded or no, let's say, significant instances of voter fraud, such that there is a fully functioning and secure system there for all mail-in votes, as well as, in Oregon and Colorado and other all mail-in states. So these systems exist. And the point that the Secretary of State of Colorado of Arizona was making yesterday was, this is going to throw all of our existing systems and the way we do things into the air, because not only is it about deadlines, it's also impacting, the question of the ability to vote by mail, to early vote in general. And this is going to throw all our systems into potential chaos. And this, if decision is due out in June, and already general election is starts in September and goes till November. I mean, as a practical matter, the people responsible for rolling out systems, recreating ballots, and laying out the infrastructure for how people vote are going to have to rejigger this whole thing. And totally unknown how that will look, at what cost to people. And there's a lot of other things going on in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really not very much time to completely change the processes and procedures, to train people and voters, right? I mean, does a voter know how many days it takes once they put a ballot into the mail for it to arrive? Like, there's no guarantees there, right? So it really throws a lot into the air. And again, it's it would create a lot of problems. And we can hope the Supreme Court recognizes that. But I know that there's a lot of concern, because they do seem to inclined to stop.
And it's not clear why. It's not clear why. Yeah. Again, on what grounds, right? So there's a lot of precedent for that. It's not clear. So what can people do in order to get the government that we want and the systems that we want? Super exciting that this upcoming Saturday is the No Kings, No Tyrants Global Day of Defiance. No Kings being organized as one movement in the United States, and now a international set of actions taking place around that. And so, can you tell us a little more about what you see taking place around the world this coming Saturday?
Yeah, well, I'm incredibly excited that there's another Global Day of Defiance across the United States. And it's really incredibly cool that a lot of this starts abroad because, of course, time zones. And we wake up a little bit earlier in many parts of the world.
We live in the future.
We live in the future in Asia, in the Pacific, in Europe. we often lead with the opening of many of these events. And I'm also very excited that Democrats Abroad chapters all around the world are participating in their own ways in this Day of Defiance with No Tyrants Day events. So, people meeting up together, like to get some coffee and then to walk over and be part of a protest. Or if there's no protest locally, often, people are organizing their own from Democrats Abroad. But it's really a powerful global movement of US citizens in the United States as well as around the world, taking this opportunity to speak up and to speak out in defense of our democracy, and against many of the things that are happening that are of great, great concern, which I can't even name. There are so many of them right now, but I think we want to see a country in which we embrace our neighbors, in which we have fundamental rights, in which our Constitution is respected, and this is a day to be able to express all of that. So it's very exciting that in dozens and dozens of locations outside the United States, Americans abroad are going to be stepping up and speaking up and having our voices be heard, and also just like being together, like making fun protest signs and bringing our kids and our dogs and and meeting new people, because I think one of the most important things in this moment of great peril for American democracy, one of the most important things you can do is just reach out to another American. Just help somebody out, connect, get to know each other, show up, and really create community in the places where we live around the world. So this is one of those opportunities.
Yeah, that's awesome. Super, super exciting for everything that's coming up on Saturday. And it's great that when people in the United States wake up wake up and start unfurling their signs, they see that people all over around the world, from the Asia Pacific to, to Europe and the Middle East and Africa, all the way down to, into South America and early time zones, have already been doing it for hours and are standing in solidarity with them. So with that, I think we should close. I mean, this was our first ever Substack Live. We've covered a lot. And obviously, these are all quickly unfolding situations. Maybe we can come back in a few weeks or sooner and revisit where these various topics went and see how things are playing. I mean, lots of elections to be discussing and a lot more going on.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, this has been great. Would love to come back. To be continued.
All right, let's do this. Thanks everyone who called in and joined. If you have, and remember, all Americans abroad can vote wherever you are. So make sure you go to votefromabroad.org to register and request your ballot. If you have questions about voting from abroad, we can help you. And if you want to engage further in helping, build a global GOTV effort and, helping finding Americans around the world and helping them figure out how they can vote and other ways they can get involved in fighting against tyranny and let's say the creep of fascism, you can join Democrats Abroad and get organized in your local community, get involved with us globally, help them figure out like really targeted, impactful ways in order to influence Congress on key issues where they can really make a difference, as well as states, attorney generals, and governors and others who are doing yeoman's work and protecting people and fighting for our rights in states all over the United States. So wherever you are all around the world, thanks for calling in. Hope to see you again sometime soon. And thanks, Martha. Appreciate you all being here.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Bye.
Bye-bye.